Welcome to Conversations with the Authors.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Conversations with the Authors. I'm your host, Daniel.
And I'm Daryl.
And I'm Sandra.
And as always, I'd like to thank you for pressing the play button and tuning in. I'd like to thank Mom and Dad for always being here and helping me out. And of course, Alexander Nakarada for the amazing score that you always do. I encourage you all to continue listening as well. This is the season finale. This is not the last you've heard of us. We will continue to keep chitting and chatting and enjoying ourselves.
So this is not the season finale?
No, not at all. This is just the beginning. As you all know, this is not a scripted podcast. We sort of go off the dome, so we're just sort of having a conversation like we always do. So I guess we'll talk about encouragement. How do you guys go about encouraging each other when it comes to writing? Do you have techniques? Are there things that you do? Or
I think that the first thing that we do is like anyone else. You know, sometimes one of us might begin to doubt that we even know what we're doing or that we can do it.
That's
and
usually me.
we'd have to remind one another, you can do it. You can do it. You
right?
can do it.
Yes, absolutely. Sandy, Mom, is there anything particular you do in terms of encouraging yourself or encouraging Dad or whomever when it comes to your stories?
To myself, yes. I go back and I look at my notes, and I remember the different little parts that I wanted to make sure I liked. And I have, in my little notes, there's pictures of you kids when you giggled or laughed or would stuck your tongue out and didn't like something, or you stomped your feet and went away. And those are my reminders.
And what is it that really sort of encouraged you to write, to not just How Nicholas Became Santa Claus, your Eric Hoffman nominated book, but just in general, what encourages you? What keeps you moving? What drives your story, as our theme goes?
Originally, I started writing poetry and little short stories because I had a great-grandpa that couldn't see. And he wanted to go places. So he would say, take me someplace, but you got to use your words.
You know, I think for me, when I was a kid, my father used to make these stories up. He would make stories up on the spot. We could be at the dinner table, and he'd make up a story. And we'd be fascinated listening to that, you know, trying to finish dinner, but we'd rather listen to him. And I remember he even recorded one once.
Yes, yes, I've heard that recording.
Yeah, that's a pretty old recording because it goes back, way back to the 60s.
And I'm such a fan because if you remember some of the earlier podcasts, we did the readings for some of the earlier chapters, and I did some voices for some of the characters, just for the hellsies. And it kind of reminded me of Grandpa.
Oh, yeah, he used to do it all the time.
And he was doing voices, and I just thought that was so enjoyable.
Yeah, that was an encouragement for me. And back in the 60s, early 60s, there used to be a brand new program that was on television. It was Twilight Zone. And it started in the 50s, but I remember it in the 60s, and I wanted to be like Rod Serling. I wanted to write stories.
Right.
So I think probably you know, by the even before President Kennedy was president, you know, I'm an old person. You know, I used to write short stories.
I've heard of it. I think a baseball card or
back in the days of Washington.
Yeah, right. How was that cherry tree?
Man, I'm telling you.
But I got into it because with the dyslexia, I had so much trouble in school. And I couldn't remember things in the order that they were supposed to be in. So I was always, you're lying or you're making up a story. So my grandpa and my daddy and my mom would say, okay, let's go home. We're going to fix this. And then they'd sit down and they'd throw out a whole bunch of pieces of paper and they'd say, see those pictures? Tell me a story.
You know, and Dad, I don't know if you realize this, but you're a black man. And
What? No! Wait.
I didn't know that.
Well, I want to ask you one question about that. When did that happen?
Oh, you know,
Anyway, all right, so I got
you
you.
know, I don't see color, but but I've got to wonder, how did being a writer, affect you growing up and being a black man? I mean,
Well, we had plenty of examples of writers. I think one of the big writers when I was in school was James Baldwin. And we were encouraged to read him, and there were others too. So it was a privilege to think that I could possibly be one of those, a member of that exclusive club.
Right.
That was just a dream of a kid, though, at the time. So writing became a hobby behind my vocation,
Right.
because I was into science,
Right.
and later I went into medicine.
was it
But that was
difficult
something-
to hone your craft as a young black man growing up?
Well, when I was a kid, I think any one of us was proud that we could conversate
Right.
completely, and we were, black men especially were looked at as probably someone who couldn't communicate very well.
Right.
So, and not everyone, of course.
Right.
And so I was just happy to be able to write my ideas down and write stories and talk to people and communicate efficiently. And so it was always something I worked at and I paid attention to.
Well, I mean, clearly you've mastered it, because reading How Nicholas Became Santa Claus, that you've published with Sandy, it's just a joy with every page. You can see the craftsmanship. I mean, I could akin it to watching someone build a house or build a boat. I mean, every nook and cranny of the story has been well thought out and planned before it was set to,
And even
to
after
say it,
that, it's no secret that I read our own book. I read it, golly, maybe 15 times.
And I think that's important.
And you have to read every
Absolutely.
line and every word.
Yes, readers, listeners, if you're...
I remember when I was reading about how to write,
Yes.
one author said, if anything that you write can be taken other than the way you mean it,
Yes.
then you probably need to rewrite it.
Yes.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so I'm always acutely aware of that, and so I'll take. I feel like a politician sometimes, doing his line by line veto, because I will veto something in my story if it doesn't sound right or if it doesn't say exactly what I mean for it to say. If I make a double entendre, I meant to make a double entendre.
Yes.
But if you make a double entendre, you don't mean to.
Right.
Then you probably want to write it and learn how to write it again, learn how to write,
And
so
that
that
author
your meaning comes through.
That author echoes grandma. She used to say, my dad's mom, she used to say, say what you mean, I mean what you say. And as a black man growing up, I definitely took that to heart and made sure that the words that I draft reached clarity to what I was trying to say.
Absolutely.
I didn't want what I was saying to be misconstrued. If I'm making a point, the point is to be made.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
hopefully you can understand that point.
And obviously, no one is perfect, but
Right.
you strive for perfection.
Right.
I don't think any of us ever reach perfection, and there are mistakes made.
Right.
But you strive for it.
And
Don't. My mother would say,
Right.
don't have a lazy tongue and say what you mean and mean what you say.
And readers, like he said, when he was learning, when he was reading on how to learn to write, and that's what's important to remember, is that no one is born a writer, no one is born a novelist, no one is born a poet, laureate. No one is born with these set of skills. Learning how to articulate, how to say what you mean, and mean what you say.
Those are things
those are things you acquire.
You acquire, you develop there. But I tell you one thing, we all get as human beings, we get experiences.
Yes.
That's
You know,
right.
some very positive, a few negative, some a lot of negative, and a few positive, and most of us are in the middle.
Right. I used to say, I had a friend a while ago who was dealing with some relationship issues, and one of the things I told her is don't regret necessarily the people that you date who have, done wrong, because they make you who you are. The people the experiences, the things that you go through in life make you who you are. You learn from every experience, and oftentimes you'll learn more from your quote-unquote failures than you do your successes. And so, sort of the same question to you, Mom. I mean, while you're not a black man, you are a white woman. And how was that for you growing up and learning how to write? Because much like black men, women weren't often given a voice either.
No. Matter of fact, we were often told, it's not your place. Don't say anything. So my dad and my mom
you
would...
were just supposed to sit there and look pretty,
Right.
right?
We were supposed
Keep
to
your
be...
manners and.
You were supposed to be seen but not heard.
That's like a child, right?
Beckoned when you were asked. You could speak when you were asked.
And smile a lot.
Smile a lot. And your answer had better reflect the head man in your household.
Right.
And I grew up doing that, and but then I was also taught, know what you want to do, know what you want to say, and don't be afraid to say it. But then there are consequences, and be willing
Well,
to take them.
you, like me, you were born in the 50s.
Right.
So
That's
parents
true.
who were born in the 20s.
Yeah. Right.
So,
right. So
and raised
And
by
my-
parents
Right.
were born in the late 1800s, early
And the
But more
1900s,
so,
right?
too, with me, I was a child of immigrants, so I had Russians and Germans and Polish people that were telling me the rights and wrongs, which in each different country were common but different.
right. So writing, how Nicholas became Santa Claus. We talked about writing, for the villain, and how that was sort of like letting the leash off, and sort of letting you, have your freedoms. And writing how Nicholas became Santa Claus for you two was kind of that same thing, but in terms of speech. It encouraged you to continue to write, to be your authentic selves in a sense, and really just let your creativity go without boundaries of race or gender.
Well, the nice thing about writing, especially when you're writing fantasy science fiction, is that you can set yourself free.
Yes. Yes.
And when once you set yourself free, and you don't abide by ordinary convention, you can write anything.
Right. And did that way of thinking, did that play into writing your characters for Nicholas, writing the story for Nicholas, writing the plot, and
Yeah,
writing
it did.
your consecutive stories?
We were writing a story about a world that we could not have possibly lived in. So we had to use a lot of imagination and a lot of research, and we had to allow ourselves to think in ways that we might be prohibited from thinking today. I'll tell you what, I went to a conference once many years ago, and no matter what you think about the way the world is now, how dangerous or how safe you think the world is, the professor that was giving the recitation was told us that the world today, now, is a safer place than it ever had been in the past. There were times in the past, if you want to think about the days of your knights in shining armor and and kings with absolute power, noblemen, they could kill you for the smallest infraction.
Just for looking at them.
And they could take your wife and have their way on your honeymoon, anything they wanted to do
On your wedding day.
right? So
and that is sort of again the freedom in creating your own world is you have the freedom to bring in the prohibitions or inhibitions or what have you of your worlds, so if you so chose, as you say, so long as it drove the story.
Yeah, in that world, in that story, we could bring all that back plus more.
Yes.
And some of it would be frightening to have to go through in real life, but you have to admit that it was intriguing.
Yes.
And it was something that made you want to find out what came next.
Yes, and I'm so glad that encouragement came into your life, that you came into each other's lives, because I exist. So thank you for that. But also,
You're welcome, I should.
but also,
hard work.
that you can create this story and the peripheral stories that I know you're
Yes.
working on, and so I've got to wonder, and I'm sure that our listeners who inevitably want to be writers, and some of our writers who want to be listening, who continue to be listeners, what sort of encouragement might you have for them as they continue on their writing or reading journey?
Get started.
Get started, because Sandy and I both know of a story of a real person who unfortunately died recently, recent being in the last, I guess, 15 years, who their relatives told us that after that person died, they found reams and reams of writing, in their closets and in their drawers and in boxes, and they thought it was good writing, but it had never seen the light of day, not once, And I fear that there are people out there that have ideas and that are writing. They just write it and put it away, and maybe that's what you want to do. But if that's not what you want to do, show someone.
Right.
Exactly. And right out in the open, come out of the.
And as a person of faith, I would say that, the God has given you a gift. He's put something in you, and clearly it wants to be shared with the world. So share it.
Don't be discouraged.
Don't be discouraged.
It took me 10 years to turn over 10 pages to my husband. And it was because I was not confident enough that my story was written well enough. But I knew Daddy had studied the languages more. I knew he knew grammar better. I knew he knew other things better than I did. So I gave it to him and I said, look, I think it's a good story. I think we need to go with it. Can you fix it? And
boy, was it a good story. You know what? I was writing something as she was writing. I put my stuff down to work on hers because it was so intriguing.
His story was like pages to the end.
Yeah, I think I'd probably gotten maybe 200-300 pages into the story. And so I put it away, I put it down, and I wanted to work on how Nicholas became Santa Claus, because it was such a fantastic story. It has such imagination.
Absolutely. I
mean,
I tried to combine all the things that I learned from the Native American people that I had met, the people of different nationalities that I had met, different religions that I had met, from my relatives who had gone through the Holocaust and the terrors that they went through. They became my villains. The terrors became my villains.
And this tender little woman next to me can write a villain. She wrote the villain. Okay. All right.
And if you're interested in more of our conversations, which are bound to happen, there will be a season 2. So please hit us up at troopbooks.com. Contact us at info@troopbooks.com, and let us know what you'd like to see on the next episodes. You can hit us up on our Instagram and our Facebook and our TikTok, all at Troop Books, TROUPE, even our threads. Because, dear writers, as someone who's dabbled in sci-fi writing, I know that it can be a daunting task to create a world from scratch. But trust me when I say it's worth it. There's something truly magical about being able to bring your imagination to life on the page, to transport your readers to a place that exists only in your mind. If you're just starting out, my advice is to let your creativity run wild. Don't be afraid to experiment with different ideas and concepts, even if they seem far-fetched at first. And remember, in the sci-fi, fantasy, anything is possible. And if you're experienced in writing, don't be afraid to challenge yourself and try something new. Maybe there's a genre or a subgenre you haven't explored yet, or a character archetype that you wanted to try and play with. Embrace the unknown. See where it takes you. And most importantly, remember to have fun. Writing should not feel like a chore or something you're forced to do. It should be a passion, a joy, something that fills you with excitement and inspiration. So, whether you're just starting out or you've been writing for years, don't forget to take pleasure in the process. It's a journey. It's not the destination that matters. Okay, it's the journey. So go forth, my fellow writers, my dear listeners, and explore new worlds. Create unforgettable characters and let your imagination soar. I can't wait to see what amazing stories you create. I can't wait to talk to you more and chat with you more on Conversations with the Authors. And I'll see you next season.